The path was thick with the smell of cut hay drifting up from the bottomland as I walked up the dusty road to Granny Tollett's place on that July morning. The cicadas were already sawing away in the locust trees, and there in the distance I saw Granny in her favorite spot on the side porch where the shade held longest. She was hunched over her old quilting frame with her needle flashing in and out, just as steady as a heartbeat. "Well, J.D., don't just stand there in the heat, child. Come on and sit a spell," she said, not even looking up. "And while you're at it, pick up that extra needle and get the quilting on your side. And boy, whatever you do, keep your stitches small. 'Cause you know what they say. It's the big stitch that will let the cold in on you when winter comes." I pulled up a split-bottom chair and the threaded needle, and then I bent down to my work. And it wasn't but a few minutes later when I finally noticed something. A little square piece of cloth pieced in amongst the rest. It was blue-checked, and it had gone soft and pale with age, and it was set off from the bright calico that was around it. I noticed that Granny's needle always slowed down when it came near to the square, and then she'd smooth it flat with her thumb before each stitch, so gentle, like she was putting a child to sleep. "Granny, how come this one patch doesn't match nothing else in the whole quilt? It looks to me like it came out of a different quilt altogether." She didn't answer right off. Instead, she finished out the row that she was on before she set her needle down and folded her hands in her lap. And then I knew there was a story brewing in her heart, for that's always how she did. Like she had to set everything else down to make room for it. That square, child, well, it came out of the only dress that Maddie Justice owned, the only one that would fit her after she got big with her child. And I've sold a many a piece near it. Matter of fact, just about every quilt that's passed through my hands in all these 60 years. And I don't recollect that I've ever told this story plain from start to finish to a living soul. All these years I've kept it in my heart, a secret that I was bound to keep tucked away. I could sense the sincerity in Granny's voice, so I set my needle down as she started out. "I remember the spring it commenced, child, and Maddie Justice was just 19, and I tell you right now, she was the prettiest, gentlest gal this whole side of the creek, and she had a voice on her that would make the birds embarrassed of themselves. She kept house for her widowed daddy up past the forks, and every soul in the county loved her on account of how she had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. I recollect there was a young man with the name of Drew Lacey who had come through working timber that fall. And Maddie, well, she fell for him the way that every girl does, the very first time a man that ever looks at them like there's something special does. And sure enough, he promised her plain as day in front of witnesses that he was gonna marry her come spring, just as soon as he had worked and saved up enough to set up their house all proper like. Well, anyhow, spring came sure enough, but Drew Lacey, he didn't. He had left across the mountain just as soon as the timber work ran out. And there wasn't nary a word, not even a letter, that ever came back from him. And by the time anyone realized that he wasn't coming back at all, well, there was Maddie Justice carrying his unborn child. Now, J.D., there wasn't a harder thing in this world to be in a little community like ours than a young unmarried woman carrying a baby with no husband to show for it. Folks that had smiled at Maddie all her life now commenced to looking the other way whenever she'd come to town. Her own daddy, Lord forgive him, couldn't hold his head up at church, and he said some ugly things that I won't repeat because I firmly believe that repeating meanness don't make it any less mean. Well, when it was time, Maddie sent for me when the baby was coming. And so it was just me and Maddie the night the baby was born. And I tell you, it was a beautiful baby boy, healthy and loud, and hollering like he meant to be heard all the way to Virginia. And all the while, those foolish folks were wagging their tongues, talking about shame and scandal. Well, Maddie, oh, she loved her boy the moment she laid eyes on him. The same as any mama ever loved any baby born under a preacher's blessing. She held him close to her and sung to him soft, words that I'd never heard before or since. Words that she must have made up herself in them long months of waiting. And they were all about a little dove flying home. She called him her dove. But child, love doesn't always have the power to keep, honey. After all, Maddie had no husband, no money, and she lived in a community that would have made sure that that baby never forgot his whole life that he was fatherless. And Maddie, well, she knew it, and it just broke her heart. It just so happened that very week the baby was born that a family with the last name of Pruitt was doing day work trying to save enough money to move to eastern Kentucky, where they had heard the land was cheaper. I remember the couple well, Henry and Clara Pruitt. Oh, they were good, quiet, hard-working people who had buried 3 babies of their own, one after another, before any one of them ever saw their first birthday. I tell you, honey, losing a child is the worst thing that can ever happen to a mother. And losing 3, well, it took a terrible toll on Clara until she could hardly look at another woman's baby without her whole face crumpling with grief. Now, I had known Clara for a long time. She was in the women's church ministry from years back, and I've wondered all my life whether it was mercy or whether it was fate that brought Clara and Maddie together. They sat on this very porch and talked for 2 days. And on the 3rd day, I saw Maddie make the hardest choice I expect any woman in Roane County has ever made when she gave her baby boy to Henry and Clara to raise as their own and to take with them to Kentucky, a place far away where no one would know about the shame the child had for not having his birth father in his life. Well, she made me swear afore God that I would never tell a soul, not even her own kin, where that family was bound or whose child it was that they carried off with them. Before they left, I watched as Maddie sat up half the night with a needle, same as you and me are doing now, and she cut a square from the only good dress that she owned, this very cloth, child, and she worked a little dove into it with blue thread that she had pulled out of her Sunday shawl, and she folded it down inside the baby's blanket next to his skin, so some piece of her would always be touching him, even after her arms couldn't be. And then I listened as she sung to him the dove song one more time, all the way through, and she swore that she would carry the tune of it in her heart until the day she died. And then she kissed her boy and handed him to Henry, and the couple drove off up the big road. And Maddie just stood in the yard and watched until there was nothing left to watch. And then she went inside, and she didn't come out again for the better part of a month.
Give someone you love the gift of old-fashioned storytelling. 5 books for the young and old alike that will make your heart smile. Click the link below to order your copy of the Appalachian Storyteller today, also available on Amazon.
Well, years went by, and Maddie never married, not for the lack of folks asking, but she always told them the same thing, that her heart had already been given to someone, and there wasn't enough left over for her to give again. Folks thought she meant Drew Lacey, and she just let them think what they wanted. For 30-something years, all while she kept house for her aging daddy, before he finally passed, and then Maddie kept it alone. She taught Sunday school. She had a patience that about near broke my heart to watch. She even sung soprano in the choir down at the Harmony Chapel Baptist Church. And every single Sunday, I swear that voice only got sweeter and sadder as the years went on. I don't believe there was a day in all those years that Maddie didn't wonder, was her boy warm? Was he fed? Or did he know somewhere deep down inside how much his mama loved him. Granny Tollett's needle stopped as she paused to reflect and looked across the hayfield in the distance with a far-off look in her eye. I could tell she was reliving the story in her mind, so I sat quiet and waited. Finally, after several moments, she took up her needle again and continued. Now, JD, I gotta tell you about a singing, and I'm not talking about a regular church service. I'm talking about an all-day singing and dinner on the grounds. The kind we used to have 2 or 3 times a summer, when folks from all up and down Emery Gap would gather at whatever church had the most shade trees, and we would sing those old songs straight through, from morning to plumb near dark. Well, I recollect this one particular time. The singing was held down at our church, and of course, Maddie was there just the same as always, sitting in the back pews with the older women, fanning herself from the heat. And there was a stranger that had come that day, a man who looked to be 30-something years old. Folks said he'd been traveling through the area, buying up timber rights for a company out of Knoxville. And Sam Amos, well, he had invited him to church, because it was thought poorly if you let a stranger come to town and eat alone, especially when you had a table to share. Oh, he was a fine-looking, dark-headed fellow with the prettiest eyes I'd ever seen. Well, directly after we finished eating and the singing commenced up again, somebody took the notion to ask the stranger to pick the next song, and I could see it in his face right away. He got all embarrassed and finally said that he didn't know the old hymns all proper like, mostly on account of his folks weren't much on singing. But he said there was one tune that he had always known, since before he could even remember learning it. And if we didn't mind, he'd give us that, though he didn't know the words. And child, the minute that man opened his mouth and commenced to hum that tune, I saw Maddie Justice go still as a stopped clock. It had been decades since I heard that tune, but I knew it well. And here was this stranger, a grown man, humming it back to us at a dinner on the grounds, like he'd carried it inside of him his whole life, without ever knowing what it was or where it came from. Maddie stood straight up out of that pew so suddenly it nearly went over backwards, and the whole singing went quiet as she walked straight up to that stranger with her hands pressed together in front of her like she was holding something fragile. And then she spoke.
Where did you learn that tune, young man? Tell me the truth. Where did it come from?
The stranger was so taken aback by the suddenness of it all, he said he didn't rightly know. And then he reached into his coat pocket and brought it out and held it in the sun for every soul at the dinner to see. There it was, child, a square of blue checkered cloth, gone soft with age, with a dove worked into it with blue thread. Maddie didn't speak one word, 'cause the truth is, she couldn't. She just reached out and touched that square of cloth with the tips of her fingers, the same way I recollect that she had touched it the night she sewed it. And then she looked up into that stranger's face with eyes the same color brown as hers, and she opened her mouth, and out came the rest of the song. The words, child. She sang the words to it, and not another soul at the singing had ever heard it. And it was the first time she'd sang it since the night she gave her baby away. I can hear those words now, just like Maddie is still singing them. Hush, little dove, the night is long. Fly home safe when you hear this song. Mama's love goes where you go, even when Mama can't follow. Child, she sung it straight through, not missing a single word, with her voice crackling and rising and breaking, and then coming back together again. And by the time she got to that last line, there wasn't a dry eye left under them shade trees. Not one. The stranger just stood there with that little square piece of cloth still in his hand, and I saw his face commence to change, all slow-like a sunrise does, like something that was coming over the edge of him just a little at a time. And then all at once I saw the full daylight in his face. He knew it, child, the way you know your own name. And he finally spoke in a whisper. Mama? Maddie Justice had carried a secret sorrow for so long that most folks had forgot she had any reason to carry one at all. And then she made a sound that I've never heard a grown woman make afore or since. a sound that was half sob and half laugh, but was pure joy, like all those years of grief was trying to come out of her at the very same time. And she fell into that man's arm like a creek that was finally finding the river it had been looking for the whole way down the mountain. I tell you, honey, there was grown men at that singing, men that hadn't cried since they were babies, standing there with tears running down their collars, and not one bit ashamed of it. Sally Ann had to sit down on the ground right where she was, on account of her legs wouldn't hold her up. And Preacher Parson Page, well, he tried to say something fitting, but he couldn't get past the first word of any of the 3 times that he tried. And I stood there with my own face wet, thinking about my own mama, who had gone on to glory many years before. Child, it was one of the most beautiful moments I've ever experienced in all my days. Maddie Justice got 11 more good years after that day, and she lived to see her baby boy get married and have children of his own. All of them would come down from Kentucky and see her each and every summer. And the year that Maddie finally passed, it was her boy that closed her eyes and softly hummed the dove song to her while gently kissing her goodbye. Granny Tollett went silent, and for a while, we both quilted in silence. But I don't believe either one of us minded it. We continued to stitch into the long golden part of the afternoon. All the while, I silently looked at Maddie's old blue dress patch. All these years later, it was still holding warm and quiet between us. Well, there you go, my friend. Another masterclass in storytelling from Granny Tollett. If you like old-fashioned storytelling like this, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button below. And I'll see you on the next story.